We will be reading from 1 Samuel chapter 30, verses 1 through 6. Then it happened when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day that the Amalekites had made a raid on the Negev and on Ziklag, and had overthrown Ziklag and burned it with fire. And they took captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great, without killing anyone, and carried them off and went their way. When David and his men came to the city, behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters had been taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him lifted their voices and wept until there was no strength in them to weep. Now David's two wives had been taken captive, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal, the Carmelite. Moreover, David was greatly distressed because the people spoke of stoning him. For all the people were embittered, each one because of his sons and his daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God.
You know, in the scripture reading read just a moment ago, David and his men, this is before he's king, they go out and they are engaged in battle, and when they come back they find that the Amalekites have taken all of their families, all of their wives, all of their children out of their city that was kind of their home base. And of course the men are upset. But they begin to blame David. And it says that they were even considering stoning him. And so here is David, and his men are turning on him, but we must not forget that he's also lost his family. His wives have been taken. And so David has that pain in his heart as well as the problems with the men of his army. But I love that last verse where it says, "But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God." David, it could be said, encouraged himself in the Lord his God. You know, David's men were ready to kill him. In addition to that, he's lost his family. And he could have given up. He could have said, "Nobody cares about me." And that's probably pretty close to true. Nobody around him really cared about his sorrow. They only cared about theirs. And so here he is in a situation where he literally had no encouragement from anyone that was around him. And instead of going into despair, it says that he encouraged himself. And where did he find that encouragement? He found it in the Lord. As a Christian, you have an instant source of encouragement that is always there in your life. It flows from dependence and dedication and conviction in God. Same dedication and dependence and conviction that David had. Well, let's ask the question this morning as we think about encouragement. What is encouragement? It is to urge forward. It is to push on. It is to strengthen yourself. At the height of the Blitz, Winston Churchill stood before the Parliament of England and said, "Never, never, never give up." I'll tell you what Winston Churchill was doing. He was encouraging himself. He was encouraging himself and others. He was reminding himself that we're not going to give up, that we're going to come through what we are suffering through at this moment. And he was hoping that others would be encouraged by that as well. If you do not learn to encourage yourself, I can tell you that you're probably going to fail in life. And you're going to fail in Christianity. You will not always be able to, and this is just a fact, rely on Grandma and Grandpa. You will not always be able to rely on Mom and Dad. You will not always be able to rely even on your spouse or your friends or even your church family, and the list goes on. And the simple fact is, the reason why is that they won't always be there. There's going to be times when you're alone. You know, there are three fundamental aspects about encouragement that I believe are important for us to remember. Number one, all people need encouragement. Everybody. There isn't a person here that doesn't. Teens need encouragement. They need encouragement because of the pressures that they face, the pressures to engage in things that are sinful, the pressures in dealing with the cruelty that oftentimes comes with that age group. Teenagers need encouragement. Young adults, whether they're married or unmarried, they need encouragement as they make that great transition and take on those responsibilities that come with adult life. Older people, they need encouragement as they deal with the change that comes with age and not being able to do all the things that were once done. And we can make a list of other people that need encouragement. The sick, those that mourn, and many, many others. It just sums up in the fact that everyone needs encouragement. 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verses 7 through 8, Paul says to Timothy, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the course, I have kept the faith. In the future there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not to me only, but to everyone who loves His appearing. Paul is in prison. Paul is about to die. The closest person to him is not with him because he's writing to him. And Paul is encouraging himself as that moment approaches. He's reminding himself that he did what God asked him to do. He fought the good fight. He finished the course. He kept the faith. And then he's reminding himself what the Lord's going to give him. He's finding encouragement in that. Now he's also encouraging young Timothy, but that's about him. You can come here this morning. You can be here tonight. You can be here Wednesday night, and I can preach and teach to you. And some people say maybe at you. And hopefully I will help. I hope that I encourage you. But the majority of work, you're going to have to do that yourself. That's just the reality of this life. Because I'm not there tomorrow, or the next day, or at night. You're going to have to handle those times by yourself. You're here about 5 hours a week, and Jerry mentioned 168 hours in the week. So there's 163 other hours that you're not here. And how you deal with these things, you'll have to work at yourself. And yes, we are always there. Every Christian, I hope, is on call 24 hours a day for their brethren. But there's still going to be those times when we're alone. Where will you get your encouragement? Where did David get his encouragement? He got it from himself and from the Lord that he served. He pushed himself forward. He lifted himself up. He told himself to get up and do the work that he had to do. There was a man at a congregation who, in just a horrible accident, and his fault, and a 17-year-old girl was killed in a car accident that was his fault. And it broke his heart as it would any of us. And he sat there with his brothers and sisters, and they tried to encourage him, and he would whisper and say, I wish I had died instead of her. And you can hold his hand, and you can hug him, and you can tell him how much you love him, and you can encourage him, but he's going to be at home at night, and he's not going to be able to sleep as he thinks about that moment. Where's he going to find his encouragement then? There's got to be something in him. He's going to have to encourage himself in the Lord. So we see, first of all, that all people need encouragement. Second, don't discourage yourself. There's enough in this world to discourage you. Don't do things that discourage yourself. We tend to discourage ourselves or feel sorry for ourselves more than we encourage ourselves in the Lord sometimes. I want us to think about 3 ways we discourage ourselves. Number 1, we discourage ourselves by complaining. And we need to stop it. We need to stop complaining about everything. Sometimes all we want to do is complain, but it isn't right. And the Bible, in no uncertain terms, says don't do it. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 10 tells us that the Israelites complained and they were punished by God. Philippians chapter 2 and verse 14, Paul gives the command, do all things without complaining So many times we just sit around and we complain about things. And I promise you, if you sit around, you're going to find things to complain about. The world will present you with plenty. The church will present you with plenty of things to complain about at times. And we sit around and we complain about those, and it's oftentimes to the detriment of our Christian lives and to the detriment of the Lord's church itself. We go to work and we complain. We complain about what we wear. We complain about what we drive. We complain about what we eat. You know, sometimes we're just complainers when it comes down to it. The elders, preachers meetings we had every week in Bear Valley, complaining really wasn't, well, you could complain, but there was a caveat to that. If you had a complaint, you were required to have a solution. We weren't there to just hear about how bad things are. We were there to figure out how to make things better. Complaining does nothing. It doesn't help anything. It doesn't change anything. Solutions change things. Solutions make things better. So instead of complaining, may we, if we do have a problem with something that's going on, may we be thinking hard about how to solve that problem, not just complain about it. We need to stop discouraging ourselves by stopping our complaining. Second, we also discourage ourselves by being negative. Those two are very close to each other. But, we sometimes approach everything in a negative way. And we see this in the Bible. Numbers chapter 13, the 12 spies have just returned from the land, and they're kind of having, I guess, what we would call today a business meeting, right? And the votes are 10 against 2. 10 are saying we can't take the land. It's just impossible. We're like grasshoppers in their eyes. They are better than us. They got more money than us. They got more means than us. They got more talent than us. They were negative. The other two were saying we can take the land with God. It cost them 40 years, that negativity did. Because it is that event, the events that came as a result of that negativity that led to God causing them to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. We need to get the negative concept out of our lives because the Bible still says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Everything God wants you to do, you can do it. And if He wants you to endure hardship, you can endure it. And He does let us at times endure hardship. He lets us endure hardship at times so that we can grow. And we see that in the Scriptures as well. And third, we discourage ourselves in fussing and fighting. I tell you, if some in the church spent the time that they do complaining and fussing and fighting and put all that energy into evangelism, I think we might convert the world. If we got all that energy harnessed in the right direction instead of the things that hurt us. Your encouragement will also depend on the people that you're around. If you hang around with gossips, if you hang around with negative people, if you hang around with complainers and troublemakers, you're most likely going to become those very things yourself. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 33, evil communications or evil associations corrupt good morals. It's discouraging to fuss and fight. So we see that all need encouragement. We've thought about how we don't need to discourage ourselves. And third, you need your own encouragement. David was able to endure because he had the ability to encourage himself. I've read books by men that have endured being in prison camps. If you remember, if you're old enough to remember the hostages in Beirut back in the 1980s, Scott O'Grady being in his going down behind enemy lines in Bosnia, Scott Luttrell, who was all alone with his SEAL team. We talked about him a couple of months ago. All alone when his entire SEAL team was killed. How do you get by in those situations? When you're all alone and there's no one else there. When you read what these people write and what they have said, they talk about what they had within them. That they relied on that got them through, their faith, their ability to find strength within themselves. If you're in a prisoner of war camp, folks, the goal of that camp is to break you. There is no one there trying to lift you up. Everybody's trying to shove you down. And the only person that you're going to be able to find strength, or only place you're going to find strength and encouragement is from within yourself and the faith that you have in the God you serve. We need to have that in our lives. What do you have in you that would enable you to encourage yourself in such situations? We must learn to encourage ourselves if we want to survive. Such an ability to encourage yourself begins with your mind. You know the old saying, take care of everything above your eyes and everything below will take care of itself. You must learn to encourage yourself. Now there are more examples that we could look at in God's Word of people encouraging themselves. I think Job is a great example. I mean, certainly Job has been hit like very few people have ever been hit. And he said in chapter 13 and verse 15, though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. And I will maintain mine own ways before him. Even if God sees fit to kill me, Job says, I'm still looking to him. I'm still holding to him. Job's encouraging himself there. If God takes from you what he took from Job, can you still say what Job said when he said, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He had a place of encouragement even in the worst of times. We can look at Joseph and how he encouraged himself when he had no family. In fact, his family are the ones that put him into slavery. He had no one. He's imprisoned falsely. You can go forward and you see Caleb again. You know, we talked about Caleb and Joshua just a moment ago as the two that said we can. Well, this is 45 years later. Caleb's now 85 years old, and there is a mountain in Judah that no one wants to take because it's got fortified cities. It's a tough place to take. I love Caleb. I'll take it. I'm just as strong as I was when I was 40 and a spy. I can take that mountain. And he did. He had an encouragement within himself with his faith. Why do you think Paul and Silas are singing to the Lord in the jail in Philippi? What do you think that was all about? That was about Paul and Silas reminding themselves who they serve and that he will take care of them. I think about Jesus. How he had no one there after the disciples abandoned him. And yet all along the way he's helping other people. Talking to the ladies that are weeping. Giving the care of his mother to someone. Saving a thief who had been casting insults at him just a couple hours earlier. I think those are ways in which Jesus could encourage himself. And you know, like Jesus, there may be times in our lives, friends, when we feel like we can cry out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And in those times, always remember he doesn't. And to trust in him. There is a moment. There's a moment when you go to surgery. You know, you're laying on that big rolling bed. And they're pushing down the hall. All you see is the lights going by, right? And your family members are there with you. But they come to those doors, right? There's some doors and have a big red authorized personnel only or whatever is on them at the hospital. But they tell your family members you can't go any further. And they give you that kiss and they squeeze your hand. They tell you they love you. And then the motion starts again and you go through the doors. And now it's just you. Where is your encouragement at that moment? There was a preacher in Missouri who felt really bad about how he handled a particular situation. His brother had surgery and came back and told him that he had not survived. And he said he wasn't there for his sister-in-law, and he felt bad about that, but he said, I had to go and I had to be alone. He said, I had to encourage myself so that I could be an encourager to her. I couldn't help her till I helped me. And he felt bad about that, but he was still an encouragement to her later. There will be times when we will not be able to encourage others. And there will be times when others will not be able to encourage us. But we can always find encouragement in the Lord. when we think about ways to encourage ourselves, I want us to remember, first of all, that you are a two-person self. There are those days that everything seems to go right. I mean, you get up and you're bright-eyed, you're ready to go, everything seems great, the day goes great, and it's just like your victory self. It's your victory days, and everything goes great, and you wish you could just freeze that day and just take it out every morning and live it again, right? So we have those days, our victory selves. But then we have other days, right? Where things don't seem to go right. And it's a hard day. And we're beaten down, and it's our depressed self that we have on those days, our discouraged self, defeated. You know, when we're having those good days, we need to learn to make provision for the others. I'll tell you about one preacher, and I kind of got tickled about it, but I thought, you know, that works for you. He said that when he was having good days, he would write little notes at his desk. He'd write notes and say, "You're a good preacher." People like you. I don't know what all he wrote, but I know one of them was, "You're a good preacher," because sometimes you're told you're not, and that's all right too. And he said then on the days when he wasn't having a good day, he'd take out his notes and he'd remind himself that there were better times than today. He would encourage himself in that manner. Let me give you just a few ways in which we can make provision and maybe be able to encourage ourselves in the Lord. Number one, learn to live by certain victory verses. Victory scriptures, that's the name of the lesson today, and I hope that you'll take this to heart. A preacher once found out on Saturday night that his mother had gone into the hospital, and before the night was over, his wife was in the hospital, and he still went and preached that morning. And he told me, he said, as I was going, I was thinking, what am I going to preach on? I've got so much on my mind right now, and I'm just worn, I'm just weighed down. And so he preached from Philippians chapter 4 and verse 4, "Rejoice in the Lord always." And again, I say rejoice. See, that's encouraging yourself in the Lord. Reminding yourself that there's joy in the service of our God. An old car salesman once told a preacher that one verse changed his life forever. And the preacher said, "Please tell me what that verse is." And he said, "It's Psalm 118:24. This is the day which the Lord has made. We will be glad and rejoice in it." That every day is the day the Lord has made. You know, you can change your life through victory verses. This isn't the first time I have preached a sermon, and I will tell you from just what people have told me. In fact, I had an elder's wife come up to me and say, "I did what you said. I've struggled with depression all my life." And she said, "And it does help me." Find 31 verses. And folks, you will not have a hard time finding 31 verses in the Bible about victory and about joy and about happiness and about strength. You will have far more than 31 verses. But find 31. And read one each day. Remind yourself every day what a victory you have. And what a great life you have with God. Read those 31 till you have them memorized. And when you have those 31 memorized, find you another 31 and start on those. When you have those memorized, you will not, I promise you, in all of your life run out of verses to learn that tell you you are victorious in Christ Jesus. So do that. Second, develop a positive attitude. Philippians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13 says, "Not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am. I know how to get along with humble means, and I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through Him who strengthens me." You know what Paul is saying there is we can wallow or we can rise. When Paul writes those words right there, we read them and we just hear them as words on a page, but he's writing those words in prison. Philippians is a prison epistle. That's what we call it. He's writing those words in prison, and he says, "I'm just as content here as I am anywhere else. He had such a positive attitude. Some people walk up to you and they go, I'm not happy. And you know, there's a part of you that kind of wants to go, no, you're not ever going to be. Because you don't want to be. You won't be until you change. Most people that say they're not happy are looking for someone else to change so they can be happy. But someone else changing will never make you happy. You changing will make you happy. Will make you have joy. Stop looking for everybody else to change and change the only person you have control over. And that's you. One of the things as a preacher that you have to learn sooner, you become a very miserable preacher, is that you can't make anybody do anything. You do your best. As Paul said, with all that is in you, live at peace with all men. Paul did leave there that you do your best, but that may not always be enough. Change the person you can change. Be that positive person. Too many people want to stay the same and expect their lives to change, and it simply does not work that way. We need to remember that God is blessing our lives. Psalm 37 and verse 25, Psalmist says, I have been young and now I am old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. You see what David is saying there? I'm an old man, and I look and I see that God's people have always been taken care of. God's always there for them. And if you're living your life for God, He's always there for you, and you can encourage yourself in that and in Him. We have so much to be positive about with God. May we use that to encourage ourselves. Third, pray. I know we talked about that in this last couple of weeks, but encouragement and strength are found in prayer. God said, cast all your cares on me. You know why? Because He cares. Oh, I need to know that, don't I? I've heard Christians say nobody cares, and I go, where is your faith? Cast all your cares on me because I care. For God so loved the world. God loved you. He loved me first. How can I ever say no one cares? Because the Creator of the universe does. And I'm just a prayer away from Him. And then last of all, be happy. Find joy. Proverbs 17 says, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. Jenny and I have sat in a couple of emergency rooms, a little bit scared for her health and for even her life a couple of times. And we find ourselves laughing, finding things to joke about. And it helps. And the psalmist is right when he says that a merry heart's like a medicine. It makes us better. It drags us out of the mire sometimes of our problems and gives us something to smile about. You know, be content in your life. Put forth the effort to find joy. And it'll help you a great deal. This morning I encourage you to encourage yourself. Do what you must to be able to do it. But it all begins in one place. It all begins with God. It all begins to dedicating yourself to Him, to the promises that He has made to you, to the promises that He has said that He will always be there for you, that He is always hearing your prayers, that He is always answering your prayers for your best, that He's a loving Father. It begins there. Note that David's encouragement of himself was in one place, in the Lord. This morning, the question is, are you in the Lord? Can you find all that great encouragement that comes from being there? From knowing that He understands everything going on in your life and He is blessing in every way that He can to help you, to strengthen you, to bring about those things that are good in your life. If you trust in that, if you have faith in that, encouraging yourself in the Lord becomes real easy and real quick. Because you simply look to God. This morning, if you're not in Him, I don't know how personally. I don't know how people get through this life without God. I can't even fathom that. I don't know how you're making it, but I promise you there's a better way. And if we can help you find that way this morning, we want to do so. We can help you this morning. Won't you come as we stand, as we sing?